Hello and welcome to the skating lesson. I'm Dave Lees.
And I'm Jonathan Byer. Have you been dreaming of the ice this week, Dave?
Yes, I was dreaming of the ice, actually. And I'm wearing purple for Taylor Swift and because Dorothy Hamill told me she loved this sweater. And I thought, with that.
Oh my God, I loved the interview with Dorothy. I thought it was a great interview you did. That was a treat to watch that.
Thank you. Yes, it was a while coming and we had texted back and forth. So it's so funny because Dorothy will be like, how's your scratch been going? So I'll send Dorothy all of my spins and then she asks about them.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I also love when you are interviewing someone like a Dorothy Hamill and they don't have the exact recollection of pivotal competition. This happens a lot of times when we've talked to skaters and stuff that we'll be reminding them what happened at their nationals or their first Olympics or something like that. And obviously I don't know, I'm not an Olympic figure skater, but I would assume I would remember all of that.
It's funny so she didn't remember that she did the double axel, the second one, but she did do it. It just wasn't in combination.
Yeah.
Right. And it's so funny to her. And then she remembers this little trip at the end of the program that looks endearing, but to her in your body has to be horrifying, right? It has to feel oh my God, the sky is falling and it looks like
God lost it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's so fun. I remember Nancy, when she won the short program at the Olympics, said something to Tracy about there was a moment where she was ahead of her music and doing nothing, and she made a much bigger deal out of it than you remember when
all time stops. I'm sure in that moment, it's this is unraveling, and yet we barely notice. Yeah.
Yes. So it's so funny, but yeah. So no. Anyway, yeah. What the dreams on ice? Let's just dig in.
Yeah. Always an exciting point in the preseason, right? We're getting all of these debuts. And I was wondering, do you think that they are encouraged to do specific programs? Because it was interesting, for instance, Hae-In Lee was here and offered an exhibition that we saw, not necessarily her short or long program. And we saw some people really simulating it to the fullest. We saw some people sort of just throwing in their triples where they'll eventually do the quads. It seemed a mixed bag of who was bringing what.
Yeah, I do think that they typically do programs you don't see elsewhere, and I think they are encouraged. I don't know if it's in the contract, but that's kind of the show where this happens every year. And it's always
why I know about it is because it becomes the preview for everything. Yeah.
And it's in a smaller rink than other shows. It seems to have smaller ice, smaller crowd. And it has a weird mid-off-season energy to it. It's hard to describe, but you're not in full shape to go out and do a new program. And the first time you perform a new program, you hope that you have so much mileage under you, and they don't, which is part of the thing. And you could see a lot of people were thinking about doing quads and kind of opened up in the air. And Kaori is always an interesting one. She always tests out her new programs there, which I think for her, it kind of works, but I feel I'm so type A that would freak me out to do the program before it felt
ready, if you will.
It would feel like the emperor had no clothes, right? And I think you could see for her that sometimes her pacing under pressure, that pattern and rhythm into the triple sow that she doubled, she didn't have a prayer of doing that. It was way rushed. And
but then the Lutz and the Flip were looking really good at this point in the season, again knowing, understandably so, after the season she had in that Olympic year, she seems ahead of the game.
Yes,
it seems like she's on track earlier.
It does. I started to wonder what's possible for her, and this is now, they always say the three-peat is the hardest. Now, granted, she wasn't expected to win the first year, but she did, right? She won Worlds, and she really was such a standout the whole season. So then she had the three-peat is hard. I think the second is the hardest, right? But the three-peat is hard typically in a championship because people start getting mentally tired at that point. So you have to bring in new energy and a new motivation, right? And it seemed like last year she really brought in new choreographers right when she had won. So she went through a whole bunch. She's still working with Marie-France. I thought that there were moments in this program that had interesting transitions in choreography. I really hated the music overall. I don't know, what did you think of the Nina Simone and the Feeling Good?
When it got to the Feeling Good, I have to be honest, like I didn't mind the opening. I was kind of like, okay, we're settling into this vibe. And then the Feeling Good part, it just sort of became a little, and this was something I was writing down quite a bit during this. Some programs really excited me, we saw here, and other ones just sort of left me with a feeling of like kind of basic. And sort of that Feeling Good moment just got a little bit more generic, basic to me.
To me, I felt like she was working on performance quality with a lot of like arm and upper body movement that we haven't seen from her before. It felt almost like an exhibition. I'll be curious to see how this translates into a competitive program. My gut says that they should go back to the drawing board and rework some things. Yeah, there are good elements to the program, but it doesn't feel majestic.
That's a good way to put it. It's an easy vibe, like you're down and you can have an enjoyable time with it, like an exhibition. You're right, but I don't see it having gravitas in a moment like winning a world championship.
I felt like last year, we kind of knew that as soon as she got into really good shape and got her confidence that she was going to win again, right? As long as she managed to do that, right? I think this year, I personally, at this point in the season, I'm looking at Hyein Lee and Yelim Kim. They both just seem to have that energy to be challengers, like that energy to want to drive forward. And if Kaori can't do a triple axel or a quad, every other jump and every other spin starts to be more under the microscope because she doesn't have more in the tank to excite us with, right? Like you have to keep, that's where you do new programs. I think Dick Button, there's this great Scott Hamilton book by Michael Steer, and Scott talked about how he talked to Dick about freshening things up with choreography and adding things to like reinvent yourself every year. And I feel like she's at that point where she needs to kind of keep it fresh to keep on top. And I wonder, like, we know her Lutz edge is not what it could be, right? And I am curious, like, if her spins will be as good. I mean, she's way ahead of last year. Right? There's a lot.
That was my big takeaway, even more than the program itself. I was like, it's clear she's on a different path at this moment.
Yeah, and I think after last year, everyone's really like waiting for her programs to see how good they're going to be. This just didn't knock it out of the park for me. But again, I don't think that her programs last year knocked it out of the park, but they were such like stretches. This seems more within her. I just don't know that this music has the room to grow in it.
It seems to push her less than the material last year, actually. I was hoping she would work with Roheen again.
Yeah, I was too. I wonder why.
She liked this Marie-France collaboration. But I was interested to see what Roheen would have done, especially after working with her for one season. I think you will bring something different to the table as the choreographer the second season, as you watched it grow and what worked and what didn't.
And she worked with Jeff Buttle, and I think that could go. I think Jeff, if he had time in advance to plan, could be brilliant. Like, I wonder how long that was planned.
Well, because I love Jeff Buttle. Some of the programs we saw here that he choreographed, I put a little bit more in that generic.
I thought that the Kazuki program, Kazuki's always been like a little bit of a flower, right? And like a bright spring day, right? That's like a little more vibrant and whimsical than your average male skater. And that's what makes him special. The same way like Kevin's so emotional that whatever he's doing has a certain level of performance and like energy to it.
Right.
For Kazuki, I felt like it lost his joy and dimmed his light. And I realized they're trying to make him more sophisticated, but this music have enough, right?
I need to be sophisticated. And quite frankly, something about his joy and abandon on the ice is sophisticated. I mean, it's the highest level of performance, in my opinion. But this was just sort of capturing like a vibe. And I mean, it still shows off his skating skills in these moments, and it still gets more impassioned in the footwork sequence. But in general, I thought, I wonder what about Kazuki's skating made you go this route?
we almost felt like it was like trying to do the Josh Ferris program, which Jeff did, except it didn't have that swagger and heart. But some of that was Josh and Josh relating to the Ed Sheeran music, because we also see Josh relate to Schindler's List in a different way, but he still has that same level of emotion.
Yeah.
And I thought that this music just didn't lend itself to capturing any, there was not a lot of heart to it.
Yeah.
It was just kind of like ho-hum, I'm in a Starbucks coffee shop and
chilling out with this music. Yeah.
do you remember when Starbucks, I haven't like hung out in a Starbucks in a long time, but do you remember when they used to sell those CDs there and it would be all
yes, they were like mixes. Yeah.
This kind of reminded me of that, right?
Like
Where
morning coffee on the weekend mix or something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of like the Taylor Swift albums during COVID. Like she had that era going on. I was like, not your most memorable. And
yeah, you were like, if I just kind of want to vibe out in a certain mood, I'm going to put this on and it's going to set this tone. And that's sort of what this did. I just think it set a tone that doesn't show off what Kazuki really has to offer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's one of those skaters that I love to see him on the world stage. And I want to keep seeing him because he's so endearing and he's so open, I think, as a person in a world where, because of this judging system, there are very few skaters that are so open with like,
yes.
You know,
and now you have someone who is, and you're almost telling him not to be, because it's not an exuding joyful energy. It's sort of an inside moody one.
Yeah, there are so many skaters that don't perform at all, right?
Right.
I think that, like, I'm worried how he is going to stack up against Kao Miura, especially knowing that Shoma and Yuma are both competing and so talented. Both of them.
Interesting, so because Kao Miura's had the Shailin program and was, again, after you used this term like many years ago on the show, I can't stop using it. It was Halloween costume. Yes. And it was a bit kitschy, and yet at the same time, some of these people that use either these kinds of soundtracks or, as we saw also here, a lot of like club song or club music kind of thing, it gets so abrasively heavy. And then also there's no sort of like liberated movement or feeling when it feels like the music is just like pressing down on the arena. It was a tough watch for me. The Kao Miura.
Tighten to it, because that's unfortunate recently.
Yeah.
I will say about Kao, I think that Shailin physical performative choreography that she does, especially with men, can kind of work. Like, you ever realize like Shailin doesn't give you like a lyrical program, but she gives you a very performative program. A lot of mix of edge, but also upper body and physical kind of movement, which is interesting. It often stops short of being like this really meaningful kind of program. Although I will say that she really maximizes what a lot of skaters can do. She made Ashley's skating skills look stronger than they were, right? Like, she really maximized her performance. And I think that she's trying to do that with Kao. And I thought he had way more energy than he did during the Beauty and the Beast program. I also thought when they muted that costume, it was not the right way to go. For someone like him, I think he needs the music to help him and he needs the costume to help him.
Yeah, now having said that, I think they could mute this one.
Yes.
Because when they have like these straps around like the kneecaps and all this sort of stuff, like my eye starts honing in on strange parts about their skating that I don't think is intended to be.
I think his success will come from strategic decisions about how out there to go and with the content as well. Yeah. We saw him try a quad under spotlights, which is extremely difficult. He did a great triple axel under spots. It'll be interesting. I think Kazuki needs to be super consistent this season, because Kao has the ability to do all the quads. If not, it's really.
But I think the one who made the smart move was Kashiro, who went to Lambiel.
Yeah.
And he's the only one amidst all of this like clubby music or like vibey coffee music or whatever it is, he comes out with the Sanson and suddenly becomes that much elevated just because it's that. And again, not always the most organic balletic performer, however, was given such sort of classy material that I think it like you were saying with Ashley and Shailin, it almost makes him look even better, I think, at the presentation than I think he even is, because it was such a smartly put together program by Lambiel, I think.
Yeah, I think in general, Shay and Ashley really worked. It just really worked well. And she brought out something in Nathan. I think, yeah, sometimes I think with some of these choreographers, the problem is when you only work with them once or twice a season and then you never work with them again, it loses its magic. And with Koshiro, he's obviously able to work with Lambiel.
Right.
Right. Or with some of the skaters in California, they're able to work with Shailin on a weekly basis or at least a regular basis.
And then I would think you also know them going into your creative process. So I think when some skater, you kind of like go back and watch their old clips and then they just plop into your rink one day and it's like, let's figure out who I am and what I'm going to be this season. I think, and that was sort of what I was getting with Kazuki is I don't know how you look at Kazuki and all that he has and all that can be brought out of him, and then you go this way. Yeah. Sometimes it's just like, could you have just given that to anyone? And you're saying Shailin brought something out in Nathan that was there. So she knew which angle to take with it.
Yeah.
Sandra, that's what makes Sandra great. She knew when Lu Chen needed a coming of age piece, and she knew when Tara Lipinski needed a classy little kid piece.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but I look at Hyen Lee, like she just seems driven, right? Mm-hmm. And one thing that I like about her, we didn't see a new program, we saw an exhibition.
By Misha Gi.
She's not getting in that mold that some of the women skaters get in, especially from Asia when they work with the same choreographers. I noticed that David Wilson will often kind of do like it almost be like, I almost describe it as like the skating version of like pastels, right? Like
yes.
And other than that Latin program that Mai Mihara did last season, I feel like she's been living in this pastel sphere for her entire career.
However, she's one of the few, Dave, that I think is an like honest to God pastel skater inside.
Yes.
Some of the other ones, like when we saw Rinka, when we saw Mao's program, when we saw Amy Ami, Nakai, all of these, it was sort of the same kind of basic general. You could tell each choreographer went to the same section of music and kind of grabbed the same vibe. But when Mai was doing the Celine Dion, which technically is that, it at least seems more honest to who she is as a skater instead of just doing a generic pastels program.
I think it's like a circular problem that skating has because the rules are so prescriptive and everyone does the same, there's no individuality. So if everyone does the same spins, you can't like choreograph a spin to the program the way that they used to. So I think that that's a fault of the rules. And because there's so much time spent on jump rotation and that oftentimes the judges don't really differentiate all that much between a great performer and an average performer, right? Especially when they elevate the marks of a good jumper. There's really not a lot of like cultivating going on. So that, and all of the Japanese skaters tend to have good basics, right? We rarely see a skater, and even on Team Korea, like they don't get to that level and have like a wide variety of skating skills. Their development tended to be rather organized and the approach quite good, right? Like Kao's not a great performer, but you can't say he's not a good skater, right? So I feel like with a lot of these like Amina Kai, and like they're all just becoming really generic versions of each other because the choreographer isn't stretching them or really able to spend a lot of time with them. But then their coach hasn't really worked on bringing out their personality either. So almost like unless you make it to the top, that's the only time anyone's going to spend any time thinking about your music and presentation. But we really see people falling in, and then it gets kind of sleepy. And I feel like skating is inherently campy. So at least with like the Russians, you have like the heavy drama, and then some of these skaters are like a nice palate cleanser to like the oppressive those type programs. But this, it's like when you see one after another, you're like, they're all
blending in.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the music choices interchangeable, a lot of the things. And I understand, like you were saying with the spins and stuff, there are unfortunate limitations due to it. However, when I look at like the opening 10 seconds and it's setting the tone, and there is this giant, clustery, messy, overly complicated, crowded choreography in the beginning, I was like, that's not part of the rules. There is no transition requirement right now. There is no complexity of directions and footwork right now. You're literally just opening the choreography. Why not give me something open and beautiful there? It's fascinating to me. And we don't see this as much in the programs in Japan or Korea. I was noticing that more with some of the US juniors that we were watching. It's just this idea that the minute the music starts, the complexity and the clutter has to begin. And you can't blame that on the rules because that's not a part of it in that moment to me.
The US, we're almost going to have to speak broad strokes about it because they're young and we don't have a lot of good things to
And again, it's about the team that works with them, not just solely a young skater who's doing what they're told. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought in general, yeah, this problem of the lack of individuality with these particular skaters, like I'm really glad that Shoma Uno has his own choreographic situation with Lambiel because they know each other and that's a unique performance arrangement that has been kind of cultivated over time. I thought some of these programs were generic, although I am excited that Mai Mihara is doing Jupiter. And like, she seems like she's stretching herself a bit. You know, she's doing the Celine Dion, she's going to be Jupiter, which is so funny. I always consider, it's always on my list every year when I pick music. Like that's always just something I've wanted to skate to, and Galina thought it was funeral music. Because they did play it at Churchill's funeral because
it's awesome music.
It's awesome music. It's very.
You remember back in the day, I had on VHS where the Duchenets did the entire thing, and they had like the Grecian columns on the ice and all the smoke effects and the water and all this stuff. It was quite a moment.
Yeah, I know we didn't see enough of them as pros. There really wasn't enough of the Duchenets, and she was a personality we needed to see more of, right? Yeah, she was fired. I actually have a friend that took lessons from them, but he was too young. I don't think that we got enough information.
Got it. Yeah. Okay.
He also like skated on the same ice as Nicole Bobek once in a while. Yes.
Wow.
He described that as like doing a spin, a cigarette break, a spiral, maybe a jump here and there. Yes.
You don't want to overwork yourself. Yeah.
Yes.
You don't want to. Yeah.
Anyway.
I will say also in this mix, we saw Sota do the Muse, which again, what does she say in The Devil Wears Prada, where she just goes groundbreaking or whatever it is? Yeah. But what I appreciated here is someone who wasn't always connecting last season, maybe to the audience, is I thought here the strategy of just getting him to hold beautiful positions and open longer moments was the smart move. He came across as more elevated than he might have otherwise.
Yeah, he's a tough one for me because
I understand.
He has all of the like attributes that could make a really interesting skater, but performance-wise, he just isn't. Yeah.
So in the best next thing that they're doing is they're like, well, let's just give him prettier positions and he'll hold them longer because we're telling him to.
And he's really good. Like when he's on, he can jump and he has good technique. Yeah, there's something like that heart is missing that you see with Kazuki, right? So, what do you think of the Russian women in Moscow? This was an interesting visit of old friends. And
again, like to me, where we've talked about this in the past, do I wish there were more shows for the skaters? Yes, but if I have to be honest, I'm never so excited to see that kind of show. Now, this kind of show in Japan where you're previewing all your competitive material and all that sort of stuff, I'm into it. But if it's just going to be a bunch of wraps and props and phoned in shimmies, I don't know. This was a tough watch for me.
We haven't seen Maya Khromykh or Daria Usacheva really in a year and a half.
Maya was looking very cautious Yeah.
cautious. And at the same time, she was doing triple triples. There was talk about her maybe skating for Italy. I think she could, like, physically and benefit Italy,
I was
right?
still very much a nervous watcher watching her. Something told me like I could smell danger
Yes.
or something,
But she's taller, she's grown up, she's adjusting her technique. I thought that she looked better. She's still never going to be a fabulous performer or someone who really captures and captivates. But she has something, and I could see her, if she can be healthy and get through whatever back issues she's had and survive the eteri method, maybe without the quads, you can survive longer. I could see her skating for another country and having like a little bit of a second act. And maybe, you know, she never got a full first act, but I at least saw that there was something there. Daria Usacheva has been trying to come back and work her way through. She's one of those that looks better on Instagram in isolation. Seeing her actually go out in a show, I don't know if she has like the physicality to do it anymore after such a bad hip injury. I don't know like if her body can move the way it needs to and have the strength and power. Her skating skills have not survived this injury, right? And a lot of that is your basic like crossovers and your hip movement and your mobility. I don't know if she's really going to be able to do it. I would love to see her be able to, but I don't know if it's possible.
which breaks my heart because she was always one of my favorites out of that group at the time.
Also, I think Valieva is an interesting case right now. She's not going, she looked like she grew again. She doesn't, you know, and she's done a lot of shows. She's one that as she grows, it seems like she needs to train more and more and more to maintain, and it's getting harder.
She looked a little tired, didn't it? It seemed like it was almost as if someone came out of retirement to do the show, was sort of the vibe I was getting from her program.
It's fallen quite a bit, a couple of months, which it did last season as well. And then she wound up getting it back, being at Novogorsk and having access to all of those things that they have access to in Novogorsk. Like, you know, they do the electromagnetic stimulation. That's a PTSD treatment. They do that every day after training in Novogorsk. You know, there are videos on the FMBA website or photos of them doing it. They also have, you know, access to Dr. Shevetsky, as one does. You know, he's
on call. Yeah.
On call with it. He's, you know, been elevated in the Federation after the great job that he did at the Olympics.
What a time to celebrate and lift him up. Yeah.
I always think like with Shevetsky, it's very interesting that he's not fired. And although he's had some pretty big scandals, you have to wonder what his success rate is, right?
Because again, we don't know what we don't know.
We don't know what we don't know.
And we're like, how can this happen? He's been caught twice. And it's like, but maybe out of 3,000 cases, that's actually a pretty darn good record for them. Yeah.
So funny. Adelina Sotnikova, not knowing her, there's something about me that like likes her a little bit. Like she opened her mouth just enough and was saying, well, my doping test was positive at the Olympics. And that's one of those things that's been like discussed and ignored at the same time.
Yes.
Where even people, Russia Trusova was like, I don't know that story. And remember, it was like
it was all scratched her second thing, right? Yeah.
Never an investigation by any of the journalists or anyone. It was just kind of, there were other bigger stories going on. And this is where there's not enough figure skating press. And if it's like, you know, a blogger going at it, they're not going to put that kind of attention on it, right? But there were so many other things going on right before the Olympics. Was Russia even going to be able to compete? What about track and field? So Sotnikova really kind of fell under the radar. And what was the story of that test and the scratch? And we never got the full examination, right? I'm sure Christine was covering Michael Phelps in track at the time, and this is going on. And
even within the sport, the outrage about her win was that Kim Yuna is just better. And this, why did the judges go that way? Not even taking into account this sample, which would have changed the story entirely for all those people searching for justice for Kim Yuna.
And was the B sample clean, or what is the real story? And WADA said, talk to the IOC. They were in charge. And then you wonder how, you know, because there are people that argue within the doping or anti-doping movement, right, that the IOC isn't really as focused on clean sport as it should be. I think that's one of Rodchenkov's arguments. He's writing another book that's going to come out. I'm going to do an As the Blade Turns this week. So a couple interesting things there. So you wonder, like, what did the IOC know? And there was such scandal, and there was such, like, one about Sotnikova's win to begin with. The Sochi Olympics are regarded as such a mess to begin with. Did they just sort of, were things swept under the rug if there wasn't abundant evidence? What happened? Yeah, and they also didn't, remember they didn't name the athletes specifically in the report? So
it didn't mention a figure skater. It didn't say a figure skater, but it didn't mention the specific name. Yeah.
Yes, we have to, like, go back to the original report. There was one of the documents at the time, I don't know if it was one of the follow-ups, one of the documents had like a skater, and there was speculation, did they mean speed skater or figure skater, right? And why was it written that way?
Do they mean Klimova, or do they mean Sotnikova?
You know, and those reports,
sorry.
You know, those reports are always such, like, political documents. Like, there are even things like in the 9/11 Commission report where, like, it's intentionally written in a way to, like, obscure, right? We studied that in journalism, like in every report. I'm sure the Kennedy report has that's own, right?
Okay.
I was reading a book about, there's, like, it's written in a way, like when the Challenger blew up, like there are things written in that report that you would never, they wouldn't push the president too far on certain things, right? They don't want to know the answer, so they don't even open that realm of questioning up, right? So I think in that case, it was like, you know, was there pressure coming from the White House to launch on that day? Like, no one wants to talk about certain things. So yeah, I don't know, that McLaren report and that document with Sotnikova, I think it's a great thing to look into, because she really just opened up a can of worms. And you know what? We forgot who she was. You don't see her in every Russian show or on television. Man, that's a lot of attention to bring on yourself when you're just like,
right.
Oh, love it. Love, like, yeah.
I remember that when we were, like, doing shows about scratch marks, and we were, you know, all this sort of stuff.
And I really feel like somehow that whole scandal really got, like, swept under the rug way too much. And maybe it's because it impacted other sports, but that's nuts, right? Yeah. That whole operation. So yeah.
Secret passages, all that stuff.
Yes, yeah. Like, you know, certain countries want to win really badly. They will do whatever.
It's like, wow, you take this really seriously. Yeah.
Yeah. But love that for her, that she opened it up, because I've really wanted to know certain things and certain questions about that. So yeah, we'll have to get people on that. That's a fun story. Yeah, that, I mean, her win was already such shrouded in such controversy to begin with.
So triggering for so many reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, remember when she waved on the back spiral? That was really inspiring choreography.
Remember when she fell several times in the exhibition because she was using giant flags as props? I don't.
Did she fall once or several times? I forget.
I want to say several times for dramatic effect, but I was like, there's your Olympic champion.
As this US Junior Cup, I think we have to talk about, like, it was really interesting to watch Kirk because we love his personality. And I think Nina always does a really good job picking music for his personality. His basic skating skills were not where they should be with the other men. And he had an injury coming into this, but they've not been strong. They've never been his strength, right? And because of that, he uses the arms, and he used to skate with Robert Yampolsky, who also, they both work with Anton Domenko, and they both use their arms to generate speed, but it's like speed that doesn't always come from the crossover, especially with Kirk. And Kirk can, like, kind of will the triples around, but then they're cheated. And it's because, like, he doesn't have the actual glide, so he has to, like, try to crank it to increase rotation, which can become a much bigger issue if he's to grow. right? To become taller and heavier and things like that. So I think with him, they really have to work on the basic technique, like a lot with the arms down. And
I mean, there was something interesting. Did you hear? Because I started it like as he was taking the ice, that part of the video, and he just like skates over to the rink. He's like, yeah, I got it. I got this.
He loves it. He's such a great personality that you.
The right kind of like perspective you want your skater to have, and then even like skates to the middle with his like spread eagles, and then the minute it's Ladonaimo, it's Rigoletto, and he just like starts and like pops the hip, and he's suddenly in performance mode. And what you're saying about Nina seeing Kirk, like she clearly sees him and knows, let him razzle dazzle, let him charm the crowd away. That's what I think Kazuki needs.
Yes.
Because it's not actually dissimilar in this inherent quality to just share with an audience.
Yeah.
But she gives Kirk a little bit more of that. It was interesting because then, of course, then suddenly Verdi music is turned into the club techno version.
You knew it was coming.
I knew something was coming. But it's interesting. Actually, I think some of like the heaviness of that clubby techno remix is a bit heavy on such like a fun performer that way.
Well, because he doesn't have, the footwork is the toughest part because he doesn't have the skating skills for the footwork. It's clearly the toughest element for him, right?
And you think because he's such a performer, that should be where he knocks it out of the park.
But do you ever see his donut spin is incredible, and the way he can fly into a flying camel, and like he's very physically coordinated and gifted, but it's in some of the more refinement. And I think that's because like he's so excited to begin with, right? Like that same like I got it. But they have to figure out a way to like refine that personality and kind of
not shrink it, but sort of like channel it.
Yeah, and it's always interesting, like that skating school, because Robert kind of skated like that too. Like we were always talking about his skating skills, but he didn't have the Kirk performance. But he could blast a triple axel. But again, they also pop it, right? So they have that, and with that technique to really generate that power. They would do it like an edge class with the chairs and stuff to like work on the lean and the ice when you like hold the chair. But I've never seen Kirk just like really work on the crossovers, like basic with someone. And I think that's kind of the difference with him and Sasha Fegan. They're almost like opposites who each like needs what each other has. Sasha works on, he's in ballet. He works on he's taking his dance tests. He works on his skating skills all the time.
That young man is all legs.
All legs.
Like I have never seen anything like it. Like it's like, here's the skater and then like his belt is here and then it's all legs there down. And he knew how to hold them because you're going to be steering because they're just so noticeably long.
Yeah.
That it could be easy for it to be something you pinpoint and criticize, but it was always extended, it was always featured, like just some really lovely choices being made there.
He and Kirk both work really hard. They're just such different personalities and skaters. I think with Sasha, he needs like all of his music is very serious for a young kid, even like the Phantom of the Opera.
He seems serious.
Yeah. But he does so many things that you'd be like, how is he not? He's also next to Kirk, who seems inherently, yes, right? Yeah.
I like both. Do you know what I mean? There's room for both in skating.
Yeah. So like really interesting to see how this works. I think as Sasha gets more power, some of those jumps, like he's worked really hard on that Lutz and the flip. And I've seen him do the triple toe, triple loop better, but he has more of like the basics down than Kirk does.
It's easy to understand where that's going.
But he doesn't have the natural thing that Kirk,
yeah.
So it's more like choreographed in than but I wonder like Sasha's mom is like more serious and Kirk's mom kind of lets him
perform. Yeah.
They have to figure that out, especially as he gets taller so that he can get the triple axel and that he can.
Well, I think of it even back to when we were watching that Hobby documentary and then Hobby showed up in Toronto and they're like, okay, we've got big performer, charismatic energy. who doesn't think that tracing circles on the ice in the morning is going to be fun. How are we going to do this? And I'm sure they're in sort of a similar boat with Khromykh, because you don't want to sterilize that thing by making him follow all these rules and do all this sort of stuff. You want to keep that energy, but yet you also need to infuse the discipline of the edges somehow. I would imagine that's a tricky way to figure out how to do that without sterilizing his performance.
That'd be interesting, because I think like Sasha and Khromykh train in the same rink. They have different coaches, right? But I think everyone is very aware of the other. Like everyone is comparing these two all the time. In the rink, the parent, everyone. Okay. And
it's fascinating because it's the epitome of apples and oranges. Like,
maybe Khromykh needs to visit Tracy for a while. Right, to work on those skates. He needs someone to just work, because like Nina's really worked with him on his spins and his choreography, but remember, she's from the dance world, not the skating world. So he almost needs like that extra ice dance.
Maybe at this point, like to shake it up with someone new, it can just help focus you in a different way.
I believe a lot of Russian women have yelled at him to try to do this. And
if that was the answer, it would have worked by now. Yeah, you know.
There's no shortage in Hackensack of
at some point, if you're like yelling at him for the 300th time to do something and take something seriously and it's not working, one might argue you might want to try to pivot your strategy.
You know what? Tracy should offer him a scholarship to the Khromykh, because we know how she could do it for all of skating. I feel like they would really vibe. And you know, she needs a Jason figure.
Follow the hobby model with him.
Yeah, she would. Yeah. They can help him. He needs that edge class every day. Hi, Yuzu. You know, he really needs that edge class that they need to figure that out, because he has, you see such like a gem and you're like, okay, we need to fix this. We need to make sure that this is on track. I think that kid Beck Stromer also has some good ingredients. He's
with an enjoyable watch, a lovely skate.
I was talking with his coach, like for him, learning quads, like the quad lutz is closer than the toe. He was one of those, a lot of kids nowadays, the coaches don't focus on the toe. Somehow in the rush to get points, people focus harder on like a double toe, on a double lutz than they do on a double toe, because you can max out and work the programs to do like double flip, double loop, and they kind of leave the toe, and then they get into bigger problems when they're older. This happens a lot in skating. And yeah, there are a lot of coaches that don't like teach the toe, but the average guy now needs a quad toe. So you need to work on that.
Right.
Yeah. But he's super talented, especially with the toe jumps. So I'm going to see what happens there. The women, I thought more of the same. I think
Mia, did they say Callan or Kalen?
I think, yeah.
Okay. That was one of those, I mean, doing Carmen. And then my favorite is you have told no story whatsoever. And that's okay. Not every program has to be a story. But if you're going to die at the end out of nowhere, you might have wanted to include me in that you were telling me the story as you were doing it, instead of just collapsing at the end.
Yeah, I don't know who choreographed her program. I know she worked with Torgashev's mom in the past. I know that they're trying to work with her on those skating skills. I think that if you're not a natural performer, why would you go with Carmen?
Right.
Yes, it has easy, recognizable things, right?
Didn't even take advantage of like sort of those easy, obvious moments. Like didn't take those moments where you could just do a little kitschy something or other. And this was the program in particular where I was like, I understand the footwork sequence can't always match the music, even though it breaks my heart because of the rules. I understand the spins, blah, blah, blah. Her opening was the most cluttered, complex, all this like various stuff. And I was like, why would you start that way? You just revealed every weakness, and I'm already turned off by skating in 2023 just in your opening 10 seconds.
I think that it's a case of they have a coach who put the cart before the horse, right? Like if you have a coach that put in all of these quads before you had the basic skating, I don't know that I trust their point of view on your skating going forward.
Yeah, it follows, I mean, it follows the worst sort of formula.
Because notice, okay, she's getting taller and then the quads are getting less consistent and then they're having to constantly rework them. And this is a big talent, right? She's obviously very good. but they've been working on the skating skills. But when the skating skills are always lagging, this is why you don't want Khromykh to get into this problem. And the thing is that everyone doesn't want to talk about it when they're young. They're like, they're young, it'll get better.
By doing what? By making what changes and choices now? Yeah.
Not by, like, if you don't ignore it, it gets to be like, it's almost like, is it too late, right? Like at what?
Tom Z always tried to use Carolina Kostner as like a bargaining tool to say like, you can get artistic later. And it was like, she got artistic later because she was working on it the whole time. That's the argument. Not that you will be an artist just because now you're trying, but you have to start trying.
But you need the ingredients, right? You need the tools to do it. You need the skating skills to get there. And yeah, with Mia, like she actually has better glide than she did in the past. They just still have a lot to work on.
My takeaway in that style and in this particular kind of skating is just short and choppy. That's just what I get from the vibe. And then the girl,
I no longer have confidence in this coach's point. I haven't had confidence before, but I think that we've not having a crystal ball. I can't see how this magically improves without major personnel changes being made. Yeah. I don't trust that point of view.
Yeah. And there's been enough time in it to see if there was sort of an arc that we were waiting to see play out.
In the same way that I don't trust Kirk's, not Nina, I don't trust his technical point of view about what's happening there, that the development has been like this. Yeah. Because yeah, that technique has been used by a bunch of skaters who are chaotic and somewhat inconsistent over time. You know, your Ava Ziegler's and like it's less than consistent.
Now remind me the name of the girl that won. Elise,
yeah.
Elise. And it was interesting. She did a lovely job. When I'm watching the program, I thought to myself, this is quintessentially North American. The music, we all could have guessed it. We could have guessed the costume. We could have guessed the program. We could have guessed the point of view. And she won. There was
That's who's coaching her now.
Who?
You could guess it.
Someone in Colorado?
Tammy. Yes.
I was like, yeah, it looked 100% like a Colorado formula. And yeah, I just thought this is exactly what we're talking about. Because again, this was a lovely skater. And I'm not saying this is something to do with the skater themselves, but why are we just fitting them into these pre-existing boxes? Like, it just seems so silly. I believe that these skaters are capable of more.
Yeah.
If they're encouraged to do so.
Yeah.
One could say, where is the incentive in the scoring to sort of shake it up and have this intense point of view or perspective on the ice? But I think that's what makes you successful. That's what makes you a fan favorite. That's what makes us root for you. That's what makes you stand out in a sea of interchangeable programs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we also saw that Donovan Carrillo moved to Canada to work with Jonathan Hunter Mills, who owns the Rotation Room, and his husband, I think was Jonathan's choreographer.
Who else do they coach? Because they looked familiar to me, but I can't say the name.
From like the Rotation Room, and they've been around. So like that, where the skaters use the off-ice harness. Okay. So I think an interesting choice, because Donovan had gone to the Eteri camps at one point. He had like, but he lived with his coach, I think, before in Mexico. So it's an interesting switch. I don't think we expected it, but interesting. Yeah, right. So
another like amazing fan favorite that one wondered if in a different scenario, like when Javi was in Spain, you know, if he was around a different set of people, could it help get him on a
you know, but good for him for seeing what Daniel Grosso did and not following along, right? That could have happened.
I won't do that. Yeah.
And he worked with Benoit for so long, so you have to wonder if Benoit wanted to coach him, because Benoit has been coaching more. So that's an interesting one. I think
again, for Donovan, I don't think that would have been the right move, because he knows how to perform. It's just sort of to get some technical clarity, I would think.
Yeah. So, and putting it all together. So
yeah.
excited to see what that happens. And it looks like Tessa Virtue got married this week, maybe not
But
officially.
why is it like skeptical? Like everything I see is like
think
allegedly and rumor and.
I think she's private about her life, so things were posted that I don't think she posted, but it's like clear that she
One of the pieces, yeah. Okay.
appeared that what appeared to be a wedding and what appeared to be Tessa and her fiance appeared to take place, though no official announcement has been made. Right? That's good for her. We knew she was engaged, so it's not a surprise. So,
But again, with that celebrity status, one didn't know if there was going to be a little spread on how it went, or
yeah, and I don't think Scott Moyer even ever announced that he got married or had a child. Right? Like I think he's completely
got real quiet. Yeah.
not real quiet. Yeah. So, well, because some of their fans are like.
Some.
I like the Taylor Swift Beyonce fans, right?
Yes. As a Papadakis Cizeron fan, I can tell you firsthand that they are serious. Those Virtue and Moyer stands. Yeah. And they even turned on Scott at one point.
They turned him. They didn't like
the new girlfriend because it's disrupting their fake fairy tale in their head. Yeah.
Then they didn't think she was good enough. They found out everything about this person. It was something during COVID, didn't he?
Yeah, and then he like took a road trip, so then they were trying to shame her by trying to I was just like, wow, this is a lot of attention and focus you are putting on these random people's just.
I think it was like quarantine shaming.
Yeah, it was something about that.
Yeah. You know what? It makes sense that he's under the radar, right?
Yeah. Look, fair enough, you know.
Yeah.
And especially for her sake, imagine how they came for her.
Yeah, I'm ready. Well, I'm ready because next week we will have the Yuzuru Hanyu show to watch on Prime and the Rory Flack show. So I'm excited for.
Yeah, you sent me like a clip where she was sort of explaining it.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to say this? That was a dreadful interview.
Yeah, you can say it.
The guy doing it was like not paying attention. It was like a high school newspaper interview, like, but he was a grown man. It was very odd, but I'm very interested to see it.
Yeah,
I don't know how we'll see it because it's on what, WE TV or something.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll figure out how to do it. We'll
Find a way.
We'll find a way. And yeah, a lot of times like everyone has a podcast or doesn't necessarily have the skills in that area. It seems really easy until people do it. So
yeah.
Not one of the worst that I've ever seen, I have to say.
So let that sink in, Jonathan. Yikes. It was making me uncomfortable to watch it, but she's great.
Remember a couple of years ago, there was that interview with that guy who interviewed Gracie Gold over Skype, and it was a very uncomfortable interview.
Yes.
And then it disappeared. Remember, like it went.
I do remember that. I remember it was like so bad. They just took it down.
And I think his daughter was a skater.
Right.
Yeah.
But I can't even remember why it was awkward. If he was just like asking tone deaf questions, or they were sitting in a lot of silence or something. Like the whole thing was weird.
Also, like, didn't he say that his daughter was training for the Olympics? It was clear that she had just started skating. It was probably like in ISI and.
Like, you're sort of the problem here in this culture.
Yeah. All right. Well, and we have the solo dance next week. Brooke is competing against Lucas. So
lovely.
And Lucas got like this huge score at this competition in Florida where the scoring was higher. And I will just say that every skater in New Jersey was definitely like looking at those scores and talking about like how high the patterns were scored, and yet fun to rib all of them about it. So yes.
Drama continues in any new discipline. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So I think because last year Lucas had to do the women's steps for the Midnight Blues. So we had some fun with that with Brooke being like, is a boy out doing the woman's part in this dance, Brooke? It's
fascinating. I'll be very intrigued to see him.
Listen, Brooke has a great personality, and this you can rib her and all.
Okay.
She's yeah. So, and that Lucas is a gunner. So he's like that kid in class who's going for it. He's like Evan Lysacek, where he's going to will himself to win, honey. Okay, that's
yeah, because I was of the sentiment. I admittedly not a super connoisseur of this new genre as it's still coming out, but I was always preferring Brooke in their head-to-head matches last year.
Or Brooke, but Lucas, the entertainment value of how he even takes the ice, his reactions afterwards, compelling. Okay, he's in it. Okay, he also posted a video on his Instagram of himself like receiving this groundbreaking score. He's what would you say? Like Evan Lysacek, results oriented, right?
I was gonna say self-aggrandizing, but yeah, okay, that works too. Yeah.
No, okay, yeah.
Oh, and we saw the Ilia, the quad axel from
Spread Eagle.
Spread Eagle.
He's also results oriented, right? That's
results oriented. Yes. Yeah. So.
Well, then it just looks sexy, everyone. But